The January 6th attack on Capitol Hill in Washington, or events in South Africa that began July 9th in response to the arrest of former President Zuma. Analogous, at least according to this expert.
I think that the analogy with the Capitol riots is actually quite apt. The dictionary definition of insurrection is a violent uprising against authority or the state. And I would say that this was an attempt. If you look at the facts in South Africa, this was an attempt to incite a violent uprising. So I think that it was, if one could think about it in legal terms, an attempted insurrection.
Professor Andrews sees multiple similarities between the attempts at insurrection in both countries, in that the rioters, at the very least in part, sought to stop a legal process. In the United States, the certification of President Biden's election victory, and in South Africa, to stop the legal detention and incarceration of former President Zuma. She also explains that both Trump and Zuma seek to connect their personal legal challenges to that of the country, while both use every maneuver available to them to circumvent or block any accountability.
We have together.
She drew further comparisons between the two former presidents.
President Trump was intent on staying in office so he wouldn't have to face a range of legal problems. And President Zuma, ex-President Zuma, has also shown himself not to be wanting to be held accountable and to escape the reach of the law. That's the third. The fourth analogy I see is loyal supporters. Despite the facts, they are President Trump supporters, ex-President Zuma supporters. They all are loyal despite their interest in not in any way being followed by these two men. And then finally, I would say one has to look at the party. I mean, the ANC is deeply divided, and I would say the Republican Party is also divided. And Donald Trump sits at the center of the division in the Republican Party, and Jacob Zuma sits at the center of the division in the African National Congress.
Both men continuing to wield significant political influence in their parties and the country, with implications for the principle of the rule of law.
There is a contest going on in South Africa about the reach of the law. And the idea is the Constitutional Court, in its judgment, stated very clearly that Jacob Zuma is not above the law. But I think the consequences go outside of the law. The reason why these followers continue to support these ex-presidents is because the conditions under which they live suggest that the major political parties do not take account of their conditions. So the gross economic inequalities in South Africa and the lack of dignity within which many people have to live their lives means that there's a ready constituency of people who are alienated and are outside of the good of the new South Africa. Similarly, in the United States, many of Donald Trump's supporters are people who feel that the country no longer supports them. Now, of course, much of it is in racist ideology. In the United States, it's about whites feeling that the country is becoming too brown for them. In South Africa, it's a class issue, it's an economic issue.
Andrews called for law enforcement to hold perpetrators and instigators accountable in order to reinforce the country's constitutional project, while urging Parliament to follow the US example and set up a multi-party probe into the genesis and executive failures linked to the riots in South Africa. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.